The uniquely large lot of rainforest has a unique percentage of 5%. Again, this means that the rate per square meter given in 2016 was and is fully justifiable. And just a correction, we stated most have 40%, but indeed the range is between 15 and 40%. This, of course, has to do with the hillside policy, as you know. Preferential treatment. Can the minister explain why extension in Maho was given while others are not permitted? Madam Chair, once again, and I think for the record, this is either the 8th or 9th time I have clarified this since being minister. Maho received no extra land. What was renewed was what they actually already had. Important to note is that extensions are only possible if the requester is the only person who can access the property through the land they already have. In the case that the MP is speaking about, this is not the case. Both lots have access to the road and as such cannot be considered an extension. Regarding permits, the permit that he requested information for, is it being evaluated by a junior or a senior or at the SG? Can more clarity be provided on this? The permit is currently being evaluated within the department. It is important to note that to some extent, permit evaluations are conducted as a team effort. Colleagues review each other's work, not only as a quality assurance measure, but also to facilitate knowledge sharing across the team. This collaborative approach allows more experienced evaluators to mentor junior staff, helping to build the expertise while maintaining consistency and accuracy in the evaluation process as much as possible. Evaluation process. What is the reason for a serious financial slowdown in the permits department? Well, I don't think it was financing, as it was, the question was a serious slowdown in the permits department. I think very important, Madam Chair, because this has been sort of a recurring attempt to demonstrate the lack of productivity. The total value of issued permits does not equate to productivity of the ministry. Let me clarify. One singular building permit can have greater construction value than a combined value of several permits. That means, for example, one high-rise condo approved may have the same value of several small homes combined. If the MP uses the measure to define productivity, i.e. total number of permits signed equals total number of permits signed, this is incorrect. During the tenure of the previous Minister of Rummy, several large-scale projects were approved, thus contributing to a larger total construction cost. It had nothing to do in principle with the total number of permits actually approved. Roadworks 2025, is a rollover or a new request. The money used in 2024 was only received in late December 2023. 2024 CapEx for road resurfacing was not used. It was only approved in April 2024. The contract for road resurfacing was signed in July 2024. Work started in October 2024, and decisions taken to roll over to 2025 were taken. As such, the 2025 CapEx, like the 2023 CapEx, has been a rollover. Can a month-by-month permitting sign-off be provided? Indeed, and thank you to the staff who came back to the government building to access this information. Really a testament to the hard work of many. In 2025, in January, this is based also on the information received from DIV, so this is Document and Archive Registry. In January, 7 permits left the permit department and 10 were signed by me, i.e. 3 of those were probably from the previous year. February, 6 left and 6 were signed by me. March, 11 left and 8 were signed by me. April, 13 left permits department and 4 were signed by me. And then in May, 21 left the permits department and 23 were signed by me. Clarity on the performance of the workers, while I recognize the performance measures of our contractors are important. I prefer not to discuss the case publicly. At the core, we are talking about people, and I believe you would agree with me that such matters should not be handled should be handled with discretion and respect for individuals involved. Moving to the clarifications of MP Omar Otley, where does the issue of the marketplace lay? Is the delay of the marketplace awaiting the update from the Ministry of TEAT? I want to address this by clarifying the roles of the ministries. Government construction projects are often supported, if not always, by the New Works Department, who offers technical advice, but the design's communication with stakeholders lies with the principal. This was the same for AZ, as it relates to the Festival Village and the Fire Department. It's also the same for Just as it relates to the prison, and finally for TEAT as it relates to the marketplace. As stated, one of the delays came from the suggestion to add a second floor. This was resolved and stated during Central Committee, and the Department of New Works takes full responsibility for this. While MP York's question is indeed new, I believe it offers clarity. New Works has requested documentation in January from TEAT, and to date this has not been provided, and as such, the permit process cannot continue. While I believe the discussions has unfortunately evolved into a finger-pointing exercise, the objective is the finalization of the marketplace. And of course, understandably so, as it involves the livelihood of our vendors. This delay also underscores the need for enhanced project management and alignment between ministries throughout projects and not just when instances occur, and especially at the ministerial level. Having said that, I'd like to propose that the Minister of TEAT and I are allowed to come back to Parliament second round with a clear position on where we are, and that TEAT, as principal, provides next steps and a realistic timeline for realization of what is left to be done. Finally, the clarifications of MP Artwell Arian. Can the Minister clarify the total waiting time before a person can actually build? And of course, he mentioned this in consideration to the need to have this in the National Gazette as well. So a comprehensive overview of the time. In principle, the whole of a building permit may commence construction immediately upon issuance of the permit. However, this is done at their own risk, indeed, as an objection or appeal may still be filed during the statutory objection period, which is 6 weeks. If the permit is later revoked or annulled as a result of such proceedings, the construction may need to be altered, halted, or even undone. No building stop can be issued just because the objection period concerning the 8-week period related to the National Gazette is not over yet. This is no building stop can be issued just because. Indeed. So indeed, you cannot issue a building stop once someone has a building permit based on the National Gazette regulations. The MP then went on to ask regarding, wasn't really properly written down, but regarding building stops in particular, how does it work, how does it happen? Regarding building stops, there is a procedural escalation ranging from warnings to removals. Once persons have reached the stage of removal, the building or parts identified as illegally constructed need to be removed. And Madam Chair, this brings me to the end of my clarifications.
Thank you very much, Minister Gums, for that. As we are done with you, I'm going to adjourn for 2 minutes so that we can have Minister Marinka Gums come in to finish off the answers from Justice. So meeting adjourned for 2 minutes. We welcome back Minister Gums to finish the clarification rounds from Minister of Justice. Minister Marinka Gums, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to the honorable members of Parliament, persons in the Tribune, listening on social media. Thank you for the opportunity to return to respond to the clarification questions posed by several members of Parliament. Madam Chair, I go on to questions posed by MP Roseberg, and the same question was posed by MP Otley. Article 132, Standard Conditional Release. Madam Chair, this article governs the general and special conditions under which an inmate can be conditionally released, typically after serving 2/3 of their sentence. The general condition is that the inmate must not commit any new crimes during the probation period. The Minister of Justice, based on advice from the Central Probation Board, the CCR, can impose special conditions such as electronic monitoring, reporting obligations, or treatment requirements. Current policy provided in writing to Parliament. Next question, Article 137, exceptional early release due to capacity issues. Madam Chair, this article allows the Minister of Justice to release inmates earlier than the standard 2/3 point, specifically due to a shortage of prison space. The early release must allow a structured prioritization, focusing on inmates closest proportionally to their statutory release date. The same rules on mandating and procedure from Article 132, 6, and 7 apply here as well. Current policy, the ministry currently uses this article actively. Inmates are released before the 2/3 mark, in some cases around 60% of time served, if there is insufficient capacity. Electronic monitoring may be imposed as a special condition, but again, this is not automatic. It depends on the individual's case and risk profile. Same policy as under 132 provided to Parliament. Articles 132 and Article 137 should be read together. Article 137 allows for early conditional release due to capacity constraints before 2/3 served, while Article 132 governs the conditions that can be applied during such a release. Think of Article 137 as the reason why someone can be released early, and Article 132 as the conditions under which they are released. 2023 policy.
Minister, do you mind now at the end of that sentence if I give the floor to
And it's really the end of the sentence, Madam Chair.
MP Roseberg? MP Roseberg, you have the floor for your interruption.
Yes, I still have 3 interruptions. The question that I have, based on the answers that were given, and I will allow, if the chair allows, of course, I am okay with the fact if the minister, acting minister gets that answer, although normally clarifications need to be answered right, interruptions need to be answered right away. Is there a separate policy available for 137, or is it being said that the same policy of the previous minister, Richardson, is being used for Article 137, because it's 2 different articles, one for prison capacity and one for prison capacity and one for early release, if that can be answered through you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. Minister Gums. Hopefully your answer will provide sufficient, yes, for MP Roseberg. You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to conclude that question posed by, or the clarification, interruption posed by MP Roseberg, the 2023 policy sent to Parliament applies to both articles. I now move on to questions posed by MP York. Clarification of the cost if an inmate per day is currently an estimate is currently $495. A detailed overview has been provided to Parliament. It's 495 guilders. And now move on to the clarification question by MP Kotai. Why was the information of the persons left to go to prison? Madam Chair, the prosecutor's office is currently unable to produce this information within a short time frame, as the data is stored in a format that is not readily extractable in the manner requested. Additional time and effort will be required to compile the information accurately. I now move on to questions by MP La Cruz. Or clarification by MP La Cruz. The measures are being implemented. Initial discussions with the fire chief have taken place, and this plan will be completed. Pictures will be sent. Thank you, Madam Chair. This comes to the end of the clarification questions posed by
Thank
the
you,
honorable
Minister
MPs.
Gums, for those clarification answers on behalf of the Minister of Justice, Natalie Tacklin. I will adjourn for 2 minutes to allow you to change over your laptop so that you can proceed with the answers from the first round for the Ministry of Finance. Meeting adjourned for 2 minutes. And we are back for the last woman standing. Welcome, Minister Gums, to the last round of questions from round one of the public meeting for budget 2025. And I give you the floor, Minister.
Good morning, Madam Chair, honorable members of Parliament. Griffier, special guest in the Tribune, dedicated support staff, radio listeners, social media viewers, all under the sound of my voice. Good morning and blessed day to all. Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to respond to the questions in the first round. I now move on to questions posed by MP Otley. Minister spoke of the need to improve the mechanisms and processes for the handling of the budget. I have requested the template for amendments. I don't know who it should come from, but Parliament should have it because this is a budget debate and amendments can be brought during this budget debate as well. Madam Chair, through you, this point was clarified during the Central Committee meeting, but I will reiterate for the record. I mentioned a template as an example of a possible solution to help prevent similar issues in the future when incorporating government modifications and parliamentary amendments into the budget. A standard template could help ensure consistency in how amendments are drafted, submitted, and processed. That was the context in which I raised the suggestion. As I mentioned, I intend to include this topic in the 2025 audit plan with SOAB because I believe it is critical to find alignment and clarity in how we handle these matters moving forward. Through discussions with stakeholders, SOAB will assess whether a template approach makes sense. And if so, it can be recommended as a tool to help improve the way we manage amendments going forward. Next question. Can you provide me a copy of the notice of 18th of August 2003 for implementation of Article 39, paragraph 1, subsection B of the National Ordinance on Taxes concerning levying of tax on business turnover in respect of supply of water, electricity, and gas? And is it still in effect? Madam Chair, as far as I am aware, there is no decree on regulation dated August 18, 2003, pertaining to Article 39, first paragraph, subsection B of the AL, concerning the levying of business turnover. Next question. Can I be provided with the number of companies that currently receive tax exemptions? Madam Chair, through you, to be able to provide an answer, we would need to know what type of tax and which type of exemption. We can then verify if the outdated tax system can provide this data. There was a question posed to both myself and the Honorable Prime Minister, where MP Otley stated, Madam Chair, that he read an article that states that St. Martin is not able to suffice its current loan and there is no provision for debt in 2030, 2035, and 2040. Is this correct? Madam Chair, through you, I am not aware of which article the MP is referring to. However, I am aware that the refinancing of the loan set to mature in October of this year, this article essentially highlights that Curacao and St. Martin are unable to repay these loans. This is in fact accurate, and the refinancing has been included in the 2025 budget. At present, discussions are ongoing with BZK regarding the structure and terms of this refinancing. Next question. Is this an accurate concern of the CFT? Madam Chair, through you, this is not only an accurate concern of CFT, but it is also an accurate concern for me as Minister of Finance. That is why the Ministry of Finance will be looking at putting a plan in place as it relates to debt sustainability. Next question. What provisions will be made to ensure that the people of St. Martin stand strong in the future? Madam Chair, through you, the Ministry of Finance plans to commence work on a comprehensive debt management plan in 2026. At present, the ministry is engaged in discussions with Caribbean regional Technical Assistance Center, CARTAC, to secure support and technical assistance for the development and implementation of the plan. We have many loans that will be expiring within the coming years, as I have previously stated during last year's parliamentary meeting, and while we currently still have room to take out new loans, eventually in a few years, indeed, this will not be possible, not unless there is growth in our GDP and income as a country, which would allow more room as it pertains to the debt to GDP ratio and interest burden. Prior to addressing the specific questions posed by the following members of Parliament, which all contain elements related to the dividend withholding tax, I would like to begin with a general statement to provide clarification on the matter. There have been various remarks and questions regarding the introduction of dividend withholding tax and the impact on businesses and the profit tax, etc. I would like to take this opportunity to offer some important clarifications on this topic. First and foremost, paying tax on dividends is not something new. Under the current ordinance regulating income tax, Article 3, Paragraph 4B, clearly states that income received from Roerend Kapitaal, movable capital, is considered taxable income. Article 5 further clarifies that under Paragraph 1, dividends are explicitly included in this category. In other words, individuals receiving dividends are already required by law to declare and pay tax on that income. The proposed dividend tax legislation does not introduce a new type of tax, but rather changes the timing and method of collection. Similar to the way wage tax functions as a withholding, voorheffing, or income tax, dividend tax will serve as a withholding on income received from dividends. This shift means that instead of the individual being responsible for reporting and paying the tax at the time of their annual income tax filing, the responsibility will partially move to the company, which will withhold the tax at the moment the dividend is paid out, just as employers withhold wage tax on behalf of their employees. So currently, when dividend is paid out, the individual taxpayer who receives the funds is responsible for declaring that income when filing their annual income tax return, typically a year later. After the return is submitted, a personal income tax assessment is imposed, and only then is the relevant tax actually paid. Under the new system, this process is improved. The tax will be collected at the moment the dividend is paid out, rather than waiting for the annual tax cycle. This ensures that the government receives the revenue immediately, which strengthens the country's liquidity position and reduces the risk of underreporting or non-payment. So I hope this provides some clarity on the legislation and helps illustrate that despite the perception that a new tax is being introduced, this is not the case. The tax obligation on dividends already exists under current law. What is changing is simply how and when the tax is collected, with the goal of improving compliance, simplifying enforcement, and strengthening the government's financial position. As it pertains to the distinction between foreign and local taxpayers, I want to clarify why this measure will primarily impact foreign taxpayers. Currently, both local and foreign taxpayers are required to pay income tax on any dividends they receive in St. Martin. However, from an enforcement and collection standpoint, there is a clear difference between the two. Collecting tax from foreign taxpayers who may have limited ties to St. Martin and may leave the jurisdiction shortly after receiving dividends is far more challenging than ensuring compliance from local residents. By implementing withholding at the source, the government partially shifts the responsibility to the paying company, which will deduct the tax before the dividend is distributed. This mechanism secures revenue upfront and significantly improves compliance, especially in cases involving foreign recipients. Besides this, you also have the issue that foreign taxpayers also typically have few or no local assets that can be seized or liquidated through enforcement measures to recover any outstanding tax debts in contrary to locals. That is why I have stated that this change will mostly impact foreign taxpayers, not because their obligations are new, but because this method ensures that those obligations are now enforceable and collectible in practice. I now move on to questions posed by MP Kotai. The minister informed us that this tax has been in existence since the time of the Netherlands Antilles, but has never been enforced. Which stakeholders were consulted during the process in May 2022, and what was the outcome of those consultations? The question was also posed by MP Duran. Madam Chair, through you, on May 18th, 19th, and 20th of 2022, the following stakeholders participated in the sessions on tax reform. Wednesday, 18th, 2022, at 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. in the COM meeting room, Notaries and Foundation Tax Committee. Thursday, May 19th, 2022, at 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., COM meeting room, Tax Administration, Ministry of TIAT, SZV, Ministry of VSA, Gaming Control Board project officers, and the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin. May 20th, 2022, at 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., COM meeting room, Chamber of Commerce, Bankers Association, St. Martin Insurance Association, and St. Martin Insurance Brokers Association, SHTA, and wholesalers. Through you, Madam Chair, there was no feedback submitted regarding the enactment of the dividend withholding tax. As previously stated, dividend income is already subject to taxation under current legislation. The proposed measure simply enforces the collection of this existing tax through a withholding mechanism of 10%, thereby strengthening compliance and streamlining the process. Next question. While other jurisdictions impose a dividends tax, their corporate income tax rates are significantly lower. Enforcing a new tax without simultaneously reducing the corporate tax would make our jurisdiction even less competitive. Madam Chair, through you, as mentioned earlier during the introduction, paying taxes on dividends is not something new. Under the current income tax legislation, the recipient of the dividend is already required to pay tax on that income. What the proposed legislation does is not introduce a new tax, but rather regulates the timing of payment and shifts the responsibility for withholding the tax instead of relying on the individual to report and pay the tax later. The paying company will now withhold the tax at the source, ensuring more timely and efficient collection, also ensuring and increasing compliance of foreign investors. Next question. I believe that if a law has been enforced for decades, we must examine whether a statute of limitations or legal precedent exists that would require re-legislation in today's economic context. Madam Chair, through you, as mentioned before, paying taxes on dividends, again, is nothing new. What is now being addressed is the enforcement mechanism. However, once the technical experts provide more context to the subject matter, hopefully it would be clear how this change can ultimately be beneficial for St. Martin, or hopefully after my answer to all these questions posed. It has to be very clear, this is now not a new tax. All individuals receiving dividends has to report their dividend when filing their income tax and are taxed on this. Next question. Have we formalized agreements with Airbnb, VRBO, and similar platforms for room tax collection? This question was also posed by MP Peterson. Madam Chair, through you, Airbnb has expressed reluctance to sign any agreements with St. Martin to withhold taxes or share data, citing the absence of legislation mandating such obligations. Their concern is that doing so unilaterally would place them at a competitive disadvantage compared to other platforms. Through you, Madam Chair, this challenge is not unique to St. Martin. It is an issue faced by many islands across the region. To address it, a dedicated work group has been established to explore effective strategies for improving compliance in the short-term rental sector. I would like to highlight that the proposal made by various members of Parliament regarding an agreement with Airbnb to withhold room tax in order to improve compliance is quite comparable to the current legislation being proposed to withhold dividend tax for the same purpose. Both measures aim to increase tax compliance through third-party withholding. While we cannot legally require Airbnb to comply, we do have the authority to approve this proposed dividend tax legislation. Under current legislation, all individuals, both locals and foreigners, who rent out properties in St. Martin for short stays are required to pay the 5% room tax. However, much like with dividend taxation, enforcement tends to fall disproportionately on local residents. It is significantly more difficult to ensure compliance from foreign property owners, such as those operating luxury villas, who are often out of reach of our current enforcement mechanisms. As I have repeatedly stated, the people of St. Martin are carrying the weight of this country. That, Madam Chair, is not fair. Everyone who benefits from the opportunities this country provides, whether they are local or foreign, must contribute their fair share. Next question. MP commend the minister's recent media statement on reconsidering the outdated property tax law. While international advisors like CFT and IMF have encouraged its enforcement, our unique demographics and socio-economic practices have made it difficult. Perhaps a revised property tax policy specifically targeting foreign-owned income-generating properties such as condos purchased for rental purposes could be explored. Another issue worth examining is the growth of the number of vehicles on the island. We face serious congestion and currently have no proper system in place to decommission or remove vehicles past the usable lifespan. A car dumping fee, for example, levied at a point of import or first road tax payment could serve both fiscal and environmental goals. Madam Chair, through you, I would like to thank the Honourable Member of Parliament for his suggestion. The property tax is already a topic addressed in the tax reform, however, not car dumping. This is something that can be looked into. Next question. For the MP, stakeholder engagement and structural reforms must go hand in hand. If reforms must be paid that are accessible. Also, a dividend tax should not be implemented before a reduction in corporate profit tax in the same fiscal year. MP hopes that these points are received as constructive criticism. MP looks forward to an open, constructive dialogue and viable alternatives regarding the statement on the reduction of profit tax as well, while discussing the matter on the floor of Parliament. Through you, Madam Chair, I trust it is now clear to the Honourable MP that the objective is behind the introduction of the dividend tax, and that is not an additional burden. I would also like to state through you, Madam Chair, that I fully welcome constructive criticism with clear emphasis on constructive. Productive dialogue is indeed essential. I now move on to questions posed by MP Duran. Tax exemption requested by Rainforest, and for what amount? Madam Chair, through you, Rainforest has not submitted any request for a tax exemption by the Ministry of Finance. I move on to the next question. Soul Beach is not included in the 2025 budget posed by the Honourable MP. Through you, Madam Chair, discussions pertaining to Soul Beach was held last year and majority paid out in 2024, as such taken from the budget 2024. Next question. The Minister of Finance stated that the dividend withholding tax will not affect local companies or residents. However, nearly all businesses operating in St. Martin are registered locally. how can the Minister of Finance distinguish between a foreign shareholder and a local one when shareholder registries are not publicly accessible? Through you, Madam Chair, the tax administration will not need access to the shareholders registry and will not be required to distinguish between local and foreign shareholders, as all registered companies are required to withhold dividends tax upon distributing dividends. This will be the exact benefit of having such a withholding tax. Next question. In the press briefing, the minister gave a fictitious example where 10% of dividends withholding was followed by 16% income tax credit. Can the minister clarify the example given? Madam Chair, through you, in accordance with Article 24, Paragraph 4 of the Income Tax Ordinance, individuals who hold a substantial interest defined as owning more than 5% of shares in a company are subject to dividend tax rate of 18.75%. This means that every local resident of St. Martin who receives dividends is obligated to clear and pay tax on that income. However, this does not always happen in the case for non-resident individuals. Although in principle, they too should declare such income under our income tax legislation, in practice, compliance is inconsistent and it remains challenging for the tax administration to effectively enforce collection from foreign taxpayers. This is precisely why the introduction of a withholding tax is being proposed, to ensure a fair and enforceable mechanism for collecting tax contributions from all who profit from St. Martin's economy. Next question. Minister stated that the dividend withholding tax was discussed with stakeholders in 2022 under the TWO project. Can the minister provide documentation to substantiate those 2022 consultations? Through you, Madam Chair, I kindly ask for some time to assess what supporting materials such as presentations and related documentation can be retrieved and shared with Parliament. However, I would like to note that the foundation of the discussions was the Phase 1 and Phase 2 tax reform measures prior to them being approved by the former government, as referenced by the Honourable Member of Parliament, MP Irian. The relevant document referenced by MP Irian will be shared with the members of Parliament today. Next question. Can the minister explain how the tax office intends to verify and enforce dividends withholding from foreign shareholders or locally registered companies, especially in the cases where holding structures in the tax havens are involved? The tax office is already under pressure, giving out wrong assessments every day, and now an extra burden is being put on them. Was the tax office staff or the staff at the tax administration updated before the press release? Through you, Madam Chair, as previously mentioned, preparations for the implementation are underway. This includes the development of the necessary form, integration into the receivers and finance systems, and the procurement of an appropriate system to manage the process. Certain staff members within the tax administration have already been informed as they are actively assisting with these preparatory steps. It is important to acknowledge that both the tax office and the receivers department are operating under significant pressure due to limited staffing and comparatively low salaries. That said, since dividends are typically distributed once a year, the withholding by locally registered companies will simplify the process. It will improve compliance and reduce the burden currently placed on the tax administration, which often faces challenges in collecting from foreign investors due to the absence of enforceable liens, thereby shifting disproportionate enforcement pressure onto local residents. Next question. The minister reported that the tax revenue could increase by 14 million guilders in Q1. Can the MP get clarification on what led to this increase? Madam Chair, through you, I stated that the Q1 revenue is 14 million higher than the budget 2025 Q1 numbers. This is mainly due to higher wage and turnover tax. Next question. It was also mentioned that the new tax forms part of an effort to lower profit and wage tax. Can the minister outline a timeline for those reductions? Madam Chair, through you, bless you. Any proposal to reduce existing taxes can be matched by a clear and realistic plan to replace the lost revenue. The introduction of the dividends tax was specifically intended to help fill that gap and strengthen the country's fiscal sustainability, as this measure would serve to increase collections by including tax collections from foreign taxpayers who are often more difficult to reach under the current tax system. However, in light of the strong opposition and even the submission of a motion by the MP to suspend its implementation, it must be clearly understood that removing this measure without an alternative will create a significant shortfall. If the dividend tax is set aside, then it becomes absolutely necessary for concrete and feasible revenue-generating alternatives to be presented. This, in turn, will delay any potential tax reductions, as new solutions will require time to develop due to legislative process and implementation. Next question. Was a comprehensive risk analysis conducted prior to the announcement of the dividend withholding? If so, can the minister provide access to that analysis? Madam Chair, through you, no separate risk analysis was conducted because this should not be seen as a new tax. Rather, it is a withholding mechanism, a voorheffing on the income tax, much like the existing wage tax system. It simply changes when and by whom the tax is paid, not whether it is owed. Next question. This is a law from 2000. Was a new feasibility study done to feel the pulse of the people and economy? Can I be provided with anything new, any new documentation, or any research conducted prior to this miraculous announcement that came from left field in the MP's opinion, like the SER or the General Audit Chamber, any information session, SHTA, any association that has to do with the business community in St. Martin? Were they consulted? If so, what was their feedback? Through you, Madam Chair. Again, this should not be seen as a new tax. Rather, it is a withholding mechanism, a voorheffing on the income tax. So everyone receiving dividends in our current system should already be paying taxes on their dividends when filing their income tax. Next question. Was an economic impact assessment conducted to evaluate how the tax could affect key sectors such as real estate, tourism, and financing? If not, can you explain why this step was skipped? Through you, Madam Chair. Because, as stated in my introduction, this is not a new tax. It is solely a measure to increase collection and compliance by having the business withhold this tax on behalf of the shareholders. As such, this whole assessment does not deem necessary. Next question. Can the minister provide details of the implementation plan for the January 2026 rollout, including legislative, administrative compliance, or preparations? Madam Chair, through you, while we have engaged with all relevant internal and external stakeholders, we are currently in the process of finalizing the implementation plan. Once it is complete, I will be pleased to share it with Parliament. Next question. What public outreach has been done to explain the dividend tax on the population and the business sector? Can the minister provide examples of such brochures, explanatory videos, or any town hall sessions? Madam Chair, through you, as I previously indicated, preparations for implementation are still ongoing. This was an answer to a question posed by MP La Cruz regarding what new revenue-generating measures does this government have. Nonetheless, the attention this topic has received during the 2025 budget debate has in itself served as an effective starting point for public and private sector outreach. I want to reiterate that this matter was previously discussed with the business community, and I have personally received confirmation from sector representatives that they were indeed aware of it. That said, I acknowledge that raising the issue on the floor of Parliament may not have been the most ideal approach. However, we learn and we grow from experience, and I remain committed to transparency and improved communication moving forward. Next question. Does the tax administration currently have the staffing, technical systems, operational capacity to inform and enforce and monitor this tax effectively? Was any internal readiness assessment conducted, and can we be provided with the results of that? Madam Chair, through you, we are currently in the process of finalizing the implementation plan with all relevant internal stakeholders, including the tax administration. Once it is complete, I will be pleased to share it with Parliament. Next question. Can the minister present a structured tax reform plan showing how the dividend tax links to the upcoming reductions in the wage tax and profit tax and include projected timelines, please? I would not want to just hear we are working on it. Madam Chair, through you, as previously stated, I proposed that the tax reform be implemented in phases rather than all at once. The detailed planning for this phased approach is forthcoming. Certain legislative changes require supporting data, which we are currently in the process of collecting. Once this data has been compiled and incorporated into the draft laws, I will be in a better position to determine the additional time required for the legal process prior to implementation. Next question. After the process has failed in the preliminary rollout, the minister wants to mention today that a professional has to come to explain it to the members of Parliament. If you are not ready for it, why are we here having this discussion? Madam Chair, through you, I would like to clarify that the process has not failed in its preliminary rollout. However, given that conflicting information is being presented both by myself and by the Honourable Member of Parliament, MP Arian, I believe it is necessary to prevent any further misunderstandings by inviting an independent, non-political tax specialist to Parliament. This will ensure that both Parliament and the people of St. Martin receive accurate and factual, non-partisan information. It is critically important that our citizens are properly informed and that this topic does not become a political spectacle. We are having these discussions because members of Parliament have the right to pose questions, and I have received over 50 questions on this matter, despite the fact that it is not directly part of the 2025 budget debate. Nevertheless, I remain committed to answering every question posed. Next question. The MP has a draft motion that he will be presenting, which was read to Parliament. Madam Chair, through you, I have taken note of the motion submitted. While I would have appreciated the opportunity to respond to the questions posed before the introduction of the motion, I nevertheless respect the honourable member's role and right as a member of Parliament. I now move on to questions posed by MP Roseberg. Clarify if there is indeed an additional layer of taxation that is being added with the dividend tax based on the video that is circulating. Madam Chair, through you, I will once again reiterate that paying taxes on dividends is not new. What is being addressed through this new legislation is the enforcement mechanism, not the introduction of a new tax. Under the current legislation, the issue of layered taxation, where income may be taxed at multiple levels, is already present. This proposed legislation is not intended to resolve that specific issue and definitely does not introduce it. However, within the context of the broader tax reform process, which is currently ongoing and aims to take a more comprehensive approach to the overall structure and fairness of the tax system, this issue can be taken along and addressed at a later stage as part of that wider reform. I now move on to questions posed by MP Lewis. When do companies decide to issue dividends? Madam Chair, through you, dividends are typically declared following the completion of the financial year, once the company's net profit has been determined in accordance with applicable accounting standards. The decision to distribute dividends is based on an assessment of retained earnings, liquidity position, and the company's overall financial health. in compliance with statutory and corporate governance requirements. Some companies have a dividend policy that clearly states in which instances dividend should and can be paid out. Next question. How is the expected amount of dividend tax to be collected calculated? Through you, Madam Chair, we are currently finalizing the collection aspect, including the development of the form that companies will use to declare and pay the dividend withholding tax. Similar to other business taxes, since dividends are typically paid out once a year, the additional administrative burden on companies will be limited. The calculation is straightforward, 10% of the total dividend distributed to each shareholder. Next question, can our current tax system reliably process dividend tax payments and related procedures? Madam Chair, through you, yes, our current tax system can process dividend tax payments as it relates to assessment. A new model or module will be required. Next question, how many profit tax has been collected on average over the last 5 years? Madam Chair, through you, the profit tax collection over the last 5 years is as follows. In 2020, 39 million. 2021, 21 million. 2022, 15 million. 2023, 40 million. 2024, 28 million. 2025 up to May, 19 million. I now move on to questions posed by MP Labega. Outstanding casino fees over the period from 2020 to 2025 were estimated at 9.2 million, as stated by the Minister. Outstanding lottery fees over the same time period, approximately 9 million guilders, bringing that to a total estimate or estimation of 18.2 million guilders outstanding. These are funds that the country desperately needs. How does the Minister plan to tackle these large outstanding payments? And upon taking office, was there already an action plan on how these funds were being collected? MP would like to also know what differs the way the Receiver's Office handles large businesses owning tens of millions of guilders to an ordinary citizen owing a few thousand guilders. How does the Receiver's Office place liens on these big businesses' accounts or move to auction their properties? MP gives an example of an auction where the person indicated that no letter nor email was received from the Receiver's Office. The MP gives an example also on a lien that was placed on his own account. The MP had to pay 1,000 guilders to have it removed. Is the same due diligence placed on these large entities owing tens of millions of guilders? Madam Chair, through you, the Receiver's Office pursues collections across the board without exception. As you yourself have experienced, Madam Chair, through you, MP, and I commend you for acknowledging that you indeed had an outstanding and not blaming the Receiver's Office. Unfortunately, some parties have substantial outstanding amounts, sometimes in the millions, and in many of these cases, legal involvement complicates and prolongs the collection process. Nonetheless, as Minister of Finance, I stand firm in my position that everyone must fulfill their financial obligation. Commitment to compliance must apply equally to all. The collection policy, currently the Receiver's Office to MPs, understanding allows, people 9 months to pay back all taxes based on the law. The Receiver's Office solely makes this decision to you. Has the Minister been in discussions with the Receiver's Office about the possibility about extending this 9-month pay period? 9 months in the MP's position is not a lot of time. Madam Chair, through you, this matter has had my utmost attention since assuming office. I have engaged in discussions with the head of the receivers, and we are actively exploring ways to both ease the burden on our collection officers and provide our citizens with more flexible options for settling outstanding tax liabilities, depending on the amount owed. For clarity, the law stipulates that taxes should be paid within 2 months. I repeat, for clarity, the law stipulates that taxes should be paid within 2 months. The current 9-month period already reflects an extension granted by the receiver's office. However, recognizing the many challenges St. Martin has faced in recent years, I am considering a more bracketed approach, offering varying payment timelines based on specific circumstances. Discussions with the receiver's office on this matter are ongoing. Next question, tax holidays. Minister stated that there are currently 3 pending tax holiday applications, 2 awaiting deliberation by the Council of Ministers, and a 3rd awaiting evaluation. MP would like to know what constitutes a business coming into consideration for a tax holiday, and if such is given, is the estimated tax savings calculated or known before approval? If approved for a tax holiday, has it been considered to request that business that is receiving the tax break that they can inject a percentage of those savings into the community, whether it be a social project or an infrastructure project? We understand that they are bringing large business to the island, therefore they are requesting a break. But at the same time, how does the minister feel about a percentage of that going to also giving back to the community? Madam Chair, through you, I agree with the sentiments made by the Honorable MP LaBega, and I can confirm we are actively exploring ways to make this a formal requirement in order to qualify for a tax holiday. While I am not in favor of retracting the tax holiday, as I believe it remains an important tool to attract investment, I do consider it essential that the criteria to obtain such incentives be updated and clearly defined. This will not only ensure better compliance, but also alleviate the burden on our already limited staff when reviewing and processing tax holiday applications. Next question. There has been made mention of the removing of inheritance tax and land tax. Is there a timeline for the minister to bring this to Parliament? Through you, Madam Chair, this legislation is scheduled to be addressed in the Council of Ministers in the coming weeks. As such, Parliament can expect to receive the proposed legislation for the retraction of both the inheritance tax ordinance and the land tax ordinance by July 2025. As Minister of Finance, I hope to return after recess to present it to Parliament. I now move on to questions posed by MP Waver. What is current rate of tax compliance and what is being done to increase the compliance rate? Madam Chair, through you, due to the restrictions of the tax system, we cannot provide information on the compliance rate, unfortunately. Next question, what is the compliance rate when comparing the stickers and the number plates as it pertains to road tax? Through you, Madam Chair, as of today, the vehicle tax income for 2025 stands at 9 million guilders. In comparison, the total vehicle tax collected in 2024 was 10 million guilders, and similarly in 2023, it was also 10 million guilders. Based on these figures, the compliance rate when assessed against the distribution of stickers and number plates appears to be consistent across the years. I now move on to questions posed by MP Peterson. Dividend tax and inheritance tax and land tax is specific law dated December 2024, and St. Martin never levied a dividend tax. Our Constitution states in Article 99 that every new tax to be levied must come to Parliament. It is one of the main principles of a democracy that if a government wants to levy a tax towards its people, that the Parliament approves it. This is the legal basis for the implementation of any new law. I go to the second question and answer both. The press release explains that through a national decree, an existing law that was applicable for the Netherlands Antilles was granted country status. Now in 2025, 15 years later, we have never levied this tax, and now we are choosing to, through a shortcut, bring this law to life. I would have loved to see this law come to Parliament, whether the old version or new and revised version, out of respect for the authority of Parliament. Madam Chair, through you, based on Article 1, first paragraph of the Landsverordening, overhangs Bepalingen van Wetgeving en Bestuur, in conjunction with additional Article 1, first paragraph of the Constitution, National Ordinance from the Netherlands Antilles, we get the country status of St. Martin. As previously mentioned, this legislation does not require parliamentary approval and can be formalized for the country of St. Martin through a national decree. However, a proper implementation has to be prepared. As previously stated, this includes necessary communication, information campaigns, publications of the signed Landsbesluit, and the establishment of the consolidated text of the National Ordinance on Dividend Tax to be established by Landsbesluit, systems, processes, and forms to be put in place before the dividend tax will be applied. It is true that we are now 15 years after the year we became country, and that the dividend tax could be updated. However, the intention is to have the withholding system of the dividend tax in place as fast as possible. This to increase compliance and generate extra revenue as of the year 2026. This is the reason that as first step, it is chosen to apply the version of the Netherlands Antilles converted to country status. Subsequently, the dividend withholding tax can be modernized. Parliament will ultimately be required to approve the updated dividend tax ordinance. However, as suggested by the Honorable MP Westcott, modernizing this law at this stage will significantly delay its implementation by more than a year, given the length and complexity of the government's legal trajectory, again setting us back for actual relief to the people of St. Martin. And again, through you, Madam Chair, I want to emphasize that everyone receiving dividends under the current structure is already required to pay on dividend income. This is not a new tax. It is simply a prepayment toward the shareholders' future tax liability. I hope this is also clear to the viewing public following this discussion. So with or without the legislation, dividend tax or dividend income is taxed. Next question. Inheritance and land tax, I understand, but the more you inherit, perhaps you should not for 100% abolish. Madam Chair, the retraction law to repeal the inheritance tax will be submitted to Parliament. It has been decided to fully retract the entire inheritance law. However, once before Parliament, members have the authority to propose and adopt amendments to the law. Next question, land tax. How the landowners are now contributing to society. Is it fair to government, land, citizens to pay ERFPACT? Madam Chair, through you, the retraction law to repeal the land tax, which I support, will be submitted to Parliament. It has been decided to fully withdraw the land tax law. However, once it reaches Parliament, members have the authority to vote on the proposed law, and I look forward to further discussions on the topic. Madam Chair, next question. Why not foreigners? Madam Chair, through you, as part of the tax improvement framework, we are examining how foreign property owners can be taxed. The matter is still under review and analysis. I now move on to questions posed by MP York. Concerning the implementation of dividend tax, in the last budget debate, I asked the Minister of Finance what the biggest issue is concerning taxes on St. Martin. The Minister said compliance is the main issue. We are facing. I also asked if the Minister is aware of our current tax to GDP ratio, and she did not have those figures readily available. So we don't know what our current standing is, but we're implementing new taxes. What is the intention besides just generating new funds? Through you, Madam Chair, allow me to reiterate that this should not be viewed as the introduction of a new tax law. Rather, the implementation of this legislation is primarily aimed at enhancing compliance by shifting the responsibility of withholding to the source. We will most likely see an improvement in compliance levels without changing the underlying tax obligation that already exists. Next question. It was mentioned that the wage tax and profit tax will be decreased. how do we intend to do this? What is the implementation strategy? Madam Chair, through you, this matter is currently being addressed by the Tax Reform Work Group as part of component C1 of the country package. Madam Chair, I must also raise a critical point. Any proposal to reduce existing taxes must be matched by a clear and realistic plan to replace that lost revenue. The introduction of the dividend tax was specifically intended to help fill that gap and strengthen the country's fiscal sustainability. However, in light of the strong opposition and the submission of a motion to suspend its implementation, it must be clearly understood that removing this measure without a credible alternative will create a significant shortfall. If the dividend tax is set aside, then it becomes absolutely necessary for concrete and feasible revenue-generating alternatives to be presented. This, in turn, will delay any potential tax reductions as new solutions will require time to develop and implement. Next question. If compliance is our main issue, how does the implementation of the dividend withholding tax help that issue? Madam Chair, through you, as previously mentioned, this legislation aims to improve compliance by shifting the withholding responsibility to the source without introducing a new tax, as the obligation already exists. I now move on to questions posed by MP Arian. What investment money has this administration brought? So if you look at the budget 2025, you have CapEx in 2023. So the budget you are approving now, what current capital investment do you have that are not rolled over from the former administration? Can we see that in budget 2025? Madam Chair, through you. The investments introduced under the Marcelina 1 cabinet pertain to several key projects. These include the mental health facility, investment totaling $14 million, the purchase of generators for GBE at approximately 72 million guilders, and the prison project, which is co-financed initiative between St. Martin and the Netherlands. Next question. When we look at the CFT comments on the 2024 financial report and the Q4 for 2024, I highly doubt that we will see any approval for 2025 or 2026. In addition to that, what guarantee can we get that for any investments in budget 2025, the CapEx will be given to St. Martin based on 2025? Can I get a timeline for funds? Can we expect it, or when can we expect it? Any kind of infrastructure money, any additional money? Madam Chair, through you. As previously stated, given that we are already midway through 2025, the likelihood of receiving capital expenditure CapEx funding for this year is very limited. The Netherlands would have needed to include such funding in their own budget planning in advance. As such, it is most likely that these investments will need to be rolled over and incorporated into the 2026 budget. Next question. I heard references to a cartoon explainer video. It was stated that this was not a factual video. Since the minister also stated that she will bring an expert to explain this tax to Parliament, I request that we get the expert's opinion on whether or not the cartoon is factual. Madam Chair, through you, the statement is noted. Next question. Is the minister aware that several members of her own coalition were unaware of the implementation of this dividend withholding tax, be it ministers or MPs? Madam Chair, through you. That is clear, and I fully respect the opinions of all members of this coalition. Moving forward, I will ensure better alignment and coordination with my coalition colleagues. Next question. If this tax is supposed to help the country, why didn't the minister take the time to explain clearly to the public? As the MP stated before, the timing of this tax in written form and verbally is not right. Madam Chair, through you. My intention with this measure was to increase government revenue in order to facilitate a long-awaited reduction in the profit tax and much other measures needed for this country. People living and working in St. Martin contribute faithfully through their wage taxes. At the same time, individuals living abroad benefit from dividends earned by companies operating here. Companies powered by the hard work of our people, yet they don't always pay their fair share. This measure is meant to correct that imbalance. I believe this tax represents a fair and effective means of generating revenue for country St. Martin. It ensures that all who benefit from the economy, including foreign investors, also contribute to its continued development and sustainability of the economy. Through you, Madam Chair, I believe the Honorable MP Peterson also expressed concerns about the abolishment of the land tax, particularly in relation to ensuring that everyone living on St. Martin contributes fairly to our economy. In that same spirit, Madam Chair, I ask us to consider the situation where there are individuals benefiting financially from companies operating in St. Martin, yet not all of them are contributing to our economy. This creates a disparity, especially when compared to the hardworking people of St. Martin who pay their fair share through wage and other taxes. It is this imbalance that the proposed dividend withholding tax seeks to address. Next question. The minister explained in her press release that the Ministry of Finance is data-driven and that we execute all laws and policies based on data. The minister then went on to say that we will be receiving approximately 10 million guilders based on a similar tax being presented in Bonaire. The minister, however, failed to say that in Bonaire, there is no profit tax, so it's an unfair and misleading comparison. In addition to that, St. Martin has way more businesses than Bonaire. How could Bonaire collect $7 million and St. Martin collect 10 million guilders? Similar questions asked by MP Duran and MP York. Through you, Madam Chair, in my initial release on this topic, I clearly stated that there is currently no concrete data available for St. Martin regarding dividend distributions. For that reason, Bonaire was used as a point of comparison. As the honorable member rightfully pointed out, Bonaire has fewer businesses than St. Martin, yet still manages to generate approximately $7 million annually in dividend withholding tax. Taking this into account and exercising caution and prudence, we estimated a projected revenue of 10 million guilders annually for St. Martin. Next question. Another interesting fact is the Minister of Finance clearly stated that the local businesses will not be affected, so the dividend withholding tax will bring in 10 million guilders solely off foreign entities.
Minister, good catch. I give the floor to MP Irian for his final interruption.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, all. Just a question to the minister, because the minister keeps mentioning and now even references Bonaire again. And I'm happy the minister mentioned that because the minister states that we are estimating to collect 10 million guilders. But at the same time, the minister is also mentioning that the local businesses could also get credit. So if you're going to collect but then get credit, how do you then collect the 10 million guilders? Because in Bonaire, in their tax system, the withholding is final. There's no mechanism to get credit. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Irian. Minister of Finance, you have the floor if you would like to cover your answer one time there, or it's in your.
Yes. Yes. So the question before the interruption, I just will repeat it and then it will be answered. Another interesting fact is the Minister of Finance clearly stating that the local businesses will not be affected, so the dividend withholding tax will bring in 10 million guilders solely off foreign entities. Is the Minister of Finance saying that the 10 million guilders that are supposed to be budgeted in 2026 will only be paid off of foreign businesses and foreign shareholders? Because what we are saying then is that foreign shareholders alone are putting up at least 100 million guilders, since we would be taking 10% of that. Through you, Madam Chair, I would like to clarify that there will be no additional tax burden placed on the people of or businesses of St. Martin. Local residents and companies already pay taxes on dividends earned, as these have to be reported in their annual income tax filings. The proposed withholding tax ensures that those abroad who benefit from dividends generated in St. Martin yet currently have to but do not contribute will now be doing so because it will be withheld. It is important to note that tax is recorded in the year the cash is received. By introducing a 10% withholding tax at the source applied to both residents and non-residents, the country secures more consistent and timely tax revenue on an annual basis. For local taxpayers, this amount will simply be credited in their income tax filings, similar to how wage tax withheld by employers is treated. This approach increases compliance and fairness without creating any new burden for local taxpayers. Next question. Can the minister explain why in her original article the dividend withholding tax was described as a landmark reform introduced under her leadership, but now she claims that it was originated in 2022? Can the minister clarify which is it? Through you, Madam Chair. As I have previously stated, various areas were examined, including dividend tax, profit tax, wage tax, tax holiday, land tax, and inheritance tax. The Honorable MP himself referenced proposals such as the reducing of the 4% transfer tax for first-time home buyers and exempting turnover tax for casinos. However, what is evident is that despite years of discussion, no concrete steps were taken toward implementing meaningful tax reform over the past 4 years. Next question. How can the minister state that this tax mainly targets foreign investors when every single business owner, including locals, will have to pay when dividends are paid out? Through you, Madam Chair, yes, this measure primarily targets foreign investors, as the Honorable MP, who is an investor himself and has even presented on this topic, should be well aware local residents are already subject to taxation on dividend income. To clarify for the people of St. Martin, when filing their income tax returns, individuals are required to report dividend income under Section 14A. This income is already taxed. Similarly, companies that receive dividends must report these as other income and pay profit tax on them accordingly. So let me be very clear. What this dividend withholding legislation does is ensure that foreign investors, many of whom are currently profiting from St. Martin's economy without contributing, are also required to pay their fair share. Under the new structure, a 10% withholding tax will be applied to dividend payouts, both for local and foreign shareholders. However, for local shareholders who are already taxed, this withholding will be credited against their existing tax liability. What we are doing is closing a gap. This isn't about adding a new burden on locals. It's about ensuring fairness and equity in our tax system. Next question, has the Council of Ministers approved the plan of implementation for this tax, and can that plan be shared with Parliament? Through you, Madam Chair, as previously stated, we are currently busy with the plan of implementation. This can be shared with Parliament after we have completed it. The plan is currently being done in collaboration with the Tax Reform Work Group and the Tax Office. The following two questions are answered in one. Can the portal be paid without a tender, or will a new tender be put out? Has the minister with the tax administration confirmed whether the current IT systems can even process or track dividend withholdings in 2026? Madam Chair, through you, whether the procurement will follow a full tender, an RFP, or a deviation process depends on the nature of the system being acquired. Whether it is an upgrade to an existing platform currently in use by the tax administration or a completely new system, The standard procure-to-pay procedures will apply accordingly. The TWO working group is currently assessing which procurement route is most appropriate under the circumstances. Regardless of the route selected, the acquisition will be financed through the TWO program. Next question. Can the minister guarantee that there will be no cash flow disruptions or refund delays for businesses receiving credited tax in the following year? Madam Chair, through you, as mentioned previously, this proposed legislation will have no impact on the cash flow of the distributing company from a business operations perspective. The key issue here concerns the timing and mechanism of tax collection, not the financial obligation of the company itself. To illustrate, under the current system, if a company pay out dividend of 100 guilders, that full amount is paid out to the shareholder, and the shareholder is later required to declare this income in their annual tax return, after which the applicable tax is assessed and paid. Under the proposed legislation, the same 100 guilders would be distributed. However, the company would withhold 10 guilders at the source and remit that to the tax authority, while the shareholder receives the 90 guilders. This withheld amount would function as a prepayment of voorheffing of the shareholder's income tax liability. When the shareholder files their income tax return, it will be determined whether the amount withheld was sufficient or whether additional tax is due. In both cases, the company disburses the same amount, the 100 guilders, meaning this measure does not affect the company's liquidity or cash flow. It simply introduces an upfront compliance mechanism to improve efficiency and enforcement. Next question. Why were no exemptions, incentives, or carve-outs included for reinvesting dividends? Madam Chair, through you, I am assuming that the Honorable MP was referring to reinvested profits. Based on that assumption, I will respond. Through you, Madam Chair, profits can, of course, be reinvested by the company at its own discretion to support growth or operations. However, dividends represent a distribution of those profits to shareholders. Once paid out, they are no longer under the control of the company. Therefore, a company cannot reinvest dividends, as these funds belong to the shareholders and not the company. Bonaire applies a 5% dividend withholding tax, and Curacao often applies zero, for non-residents. So what is the rationale for St. Martin applying the highest combined rate in the region without any competitive plan to attract or keep foreign investment? Madam Chair, through you, I am not sure what is meant by combined rates, but again, I will make some assumptions and assume that combining is profit tax and dividend tax. Through you, Madam Chair, when we are talking about profit tax and dividend tax, we are talking about two complete different things. One is levied on the business, and the other one is levied on the shareholder. I want to reiterate again, Madam Chair, that in our current system, that is already the case. Next question. Can the minister name one single jurisdiction that has simultaneously 34.5% corporate tax as well as 10% dividend withholding tax? Since St. Martin is not only one of the highest in the region, we are actually top 20 in the world when it comes to corporate income tax. Madam Chair, through you, I would like to reiterate that since my campaign and upon assuming office, I have consistently stated my intentions to reduce profit tax rate to 15% in phases. This position has been clear and unwavering. It is evident that St. Martin's current profit tax rate is too high and must be reduced. My plan remains to implement the tourist tax and other revenue-generating measures, after which the phased reduction of the profit tax would follow. I would also like to highlight for the Honorable MP that Aruba currently applies a profit tax rate of 22%, a dividend withholding tax of 10%, and a turnover tax of 7%. Similarly, Jamaica imposes a 25% tax and a 15% dividend withholding tax. Next question. Can the minister honestly say that introducing this tax now with no exceptions or exemptions, my apologies, and no consultation is the best way to help a recovering economy? Through you, Madam Chair, as I have previously stated, stakeholders has been consulted on this matter. I can honestly acknowledge that my approach may have been somewhat enthusiastic, as it was driven by a sincere intention to increase revenue sooner in order to provide much-needed relief to the people of St. Martin. However, I must emphasize that this is not a new tax. Next question, if this tax is really about fairness, why roll it out without fairness in the process? Madam Chair, through you, fairness lies in ensuring both local and foreign recipients of dividends are treated equally. Currently, the tax administration is able to take quicker action against local taxpayers because their whereabouts are known and accessible. By requiring all persons receiving dividends, whether local or foreign, to pay their fair share, we ensure a more equitable system and strengthen contributions to the government coffers. Next question. The Ministry of Finance looked into a number of taxes in phase one during my tenure. The dividend withholding tax is also something we researched and looked into, and we discussed making amendments to it to ensure that we are aligned regionally. In phase two, we were pushing to tax casinos and lotteries. Why didn't the minister start with this tax instead of starting with a tax that hits the business community? Madam Chair, through you, I must reiterate that this should not be regarded as a new tax. And I trust that following my explanation today, this is now clear to the honorable members of Parliament. And that the understanding and true nature of this dividend withholding tax. This measure is not about introducing additional taxation, but rather about enhancing government liquidity and improving compliance by ensuring that all dividend recipients, local or foreign, contribute as required under current income tax legislation. Moreover, I must correct the record regarding the honorable MP's assertion that the previous government looked into dividend withholding tax and discussed making regional alignment amendments. That statement does not align with the decision taken by the then Council of Ministers. The honorable MP made several references to proposed tax reforms, including suggestions to tax casinos and lotteries. However, it is evident that no such reforms have been implemented to date. Next question. The repeal not only includes land tax and profit tax, it also includes the tax holiday. Is the government going to enact the repeal on the tax holiday initiated by the previous government as mentioned in phase two? Madam Chair, through you, as previously stated on the floor of Parliament, I am not in favor of retracting the tax holiday, as I believe it remains an important tool to attract investment. I do consider it essential that the criteria to obtain such incentives be updated and clearly defined. This will not only ensure better compliance, but also alleviate the burden on our already limited staff when reviewing and processing the tax holiday applications. Next question. Can Parliament receive the exhaustive list of legislation from phase one and phase two? Madam Chair, through you, as requested, the approved phase one and phase two exhaustive list of legislation as approved by the previous National Alliance UP-led government will be shared with all members of Parliament. I now move on to questions by MP Prescott Williams. Dividend withholding tax. What this law that apparently is on the books does is put an obligation on the company that declares dividend. And there's a big difference there, whether it is withheld from the dividend to be paid to someone or the person is obliged as it is now to pay dividend as part of, and the question would be, why that change? Why that change going back to even more before 10-10-10? Additionally, the MP stated the enactment dividend withholding tax law is outdated.
Thank you, Minister Gums. I see that MP York would like to make use of his second interruption. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question for the minister. The minister just alluded to the fact that she is not in favor of abolishing the tax holiday. Sorry, it's late. The tax holiday. Can the minister explain the correlation between that decision or that opinion and that of the CFT, who not so long ago advised or are of the opinion that the tax holiday is no longer fit for purpose in today's St. Martin? Thank you.
Thank you, MP York. Minister, you have the floor to comment on his question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, MP York, for your clarification. And indeed, I did state that I am not a proponent of abolishing tax holiday. And the reason for that, yes, and I do also understand CFT's position. However, that is their advice, and I do understand their position in the advice based on how the tax holiday law is in its current form. However, as explained to the Honorable House of Parliament, especially with reference to the question from MP Labega, in asking if the tax holiday recipients can be more engaging towards societal needs, for example, I think if it is revised to allow that opportunity, and maybe then when it is revised, then the CFT may have a different opinion. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that opportunity to respond. Madam Chair, going back to the question posed by MP Westcott Williams, Madam Chair, through you, the introduction of a dividend withholding tax provides a more efficient mechanism for taxing income distribution to shareholders on profits earned within the country. It allows for taxation at the point of distribution rather than relying solely on annual income tax filing. It is also important to highlight that the majority of our tax legislation dates back to the 1970s and has seen only limited updates since then. I believe it is important to clarify that the tax work group consists of both tax and fiscal specialists with expertise in legislative processes. Therefore, I want to dispel any perception that we simply took an old law and brushed it off without any review or consideration. As such, based on the advice from these specialists, it was decided to proceed with the introduction of the dividend withholding tax in its current form. My primary focus has always been to generate sustainable revenue for Country St. Martin, and this measure is a step in that direction. At this stage, opting to completely overhaul the legislation and return to the drawing board would not only set us back significantly, but also delay much needed progress, while there is always room to make adjustments and improvements to the law. Requesting a complete restart only to have it vetted again by the same legal specialists who were already involved in its development seems counterproductive. Next question. Regarding the latest TWO report, it says that there was in 2024 a position paper, tax revenue agenda, adopted by Minister and presented to Parliament. Which paper is that, and with what taxes? Madam Chair, through you, I would like to note that during his tenure as Minister of Finance, the Honourable MP Arian did provide a presentation to Parliament outlining suggested tax reform measures. The policy paper referenced by the Honourable MP and shared with Parliament included a range of proposed changes: the abolishment of certain taxes, an increase in BBO rate for hotel accommodations, the introduction of a dividend withholding tax, the implementation of a dual tariff for motor vehicles, the introduction of a gambling tax on winnings, an extension of the dividend tax to include other types of proceeds, as well as the introduction of a sin tax and condominium tax. Through you, Madam Chair, it is important to note that the reference document does include a statement suggesting that the profit tax rate could be reduced, if possible, on a budget-neutral basis, meaning such a reduction would need to be compensated by other revenue measures. However, that was not presented as a concrete part of the official reform package at the time. It therefore appears that the idea to reduce the profit tax rate may have gained emphasis only after the Honorable MP left office and assumed his current role as the Member of Parliament. However, now not taking into account the budget neutral part, he emphasized that I stated the relief for our elderly as it relates to exempting their AOV income as a taxable source of income. Next question. The MP expresses her concern regarding the TWO, as they stated that they cannot take on any more things because their time is running out. What are the priorities established by the government for the TWO at this time? When the MP asked for the meeting in Parliament with the TWO and government ministers about the TWO, the MP was told that the meeting was to take place with the government to reestablish their priorities. What are these priorities? Madam Chair, through you. In light of the fact that the TWO will cease all services as of April 1, 2027, the current focus is on finalizing ongoing projects rather than initiating new ones. The priorities for the Ministry of Finance are revamping of the tax administration, which includes a tax system, financial management, and tax reform. The following questions were posed to Minister Bruch by MP Arian. Why is there no update in the budget 2025 about the audit recovery plan or settlement agreements for the increase of SZV in full? SZV needs now 6 million guilders per month. According to the answers, we were paying them about 5 million guilders. So are we now increasing their debt with SZV or OZR with a debt of 1 million guilders every month? Since the government is saying that they have over 50 million guilder surplus in the first quarter, why can't SZV be paid to stop the bleeding? Madam Chair, through you, as previously mentioned, Q1 and Q4 every year show strong results. However, these results are typically used to offset the decline in collections that we experienced during Q2 and Q3. Therefore, it would not be accurate to state that the surplus of Q1 can be used to cover payments to SZV. In discussions with SZV, we have reached an agreement to increase our monthly payment to 6 million as requested by them. Regarding the audit, this has been included in the 2025 budget under the Ministry of Finance as part of the audit plan to be carried out by SWABE. The next question to the Minister of VSA. Have you had these conversations with the Minister of Finance? Have you had these conversations with SZV? Is it correct that SZV needs 6 million guilders and we have been paying them 5 million guilders? What amount are we paying SZV per month for OZR? Madam Chair, through you, we began paying 6 million guilders as per May 2025. Next question. The previous administration had an agreement for 95 million guilders that we both agreed on after months of discussion with SWABE and CFT, to the point that all parties said this is part of the best agreement we're going to get. The current administration throws it off the table and starts the whole process over again with the same entities that told us to go ahead. And now, since the deal is off the table, it has gone from 95 million guilders to 125 million guilders. I am asking the Minister of VSA to confirm what I just said regarding the agreements and what the total amount is, and if the old deal is off the table because they are starting the process over again with SWABE. I want the Minister to confirm all these answers before coming into Parliament with the Minister of Finance and SZV. Madam Chair, through you, I am uncertain as to what deal the Honourable MP is referring to. I would like to emphasize that we do not make deals with the public funds of the people of St. Martin. The figure of 95 million guilders stated in the document as an amount to be agreed upon with SZV was not supported by any substantiating documentation. Furthermore, the Honourable MP's reference to both SOAB and CFT, allegedly endorsing this agreement is absolutely incorrect. There is no substantiation provided for this amount, nor have either of these institutions formally approved it. It is precisely for this reason that I requested a comprehensive review of the proposed figure. Approving or signing off on such a significant financial commitment without proper justification or clear understanding of how the amount was determined would have been irresponsible on my part as Minister of Finance of St. Martin. At this time, I would like, with your indulgence, Madam Chair, and I know it's late, to thank everyone who attended the recent step-by-step guide to filing your income tax form sessions conducted by our very own tax specialist, Mr. Marlon Quidama. I especially want to commend Mr. Quidama for his dedication and efforts in making these sessions both informative and engaging. The sessions, one for civil servants and one open to the public, were very well attended, with a total of approximately 180 participants eager to learn and better understand the process. One of the best or the most important elements of improving tax compliance is ensuring that the public is properly educated and informed. We recognize that taxes are not always straightforward, and that is why we are committed to supporting initiatives that enhance understanding. In addition to the live sessions, an instructional video will soon be made available to further support our community. I would also like to propose organizing a similar session specifically for members of Parliament. As representatives of the people, it is essential that we all have a clear understanding of our tax system so that we can properly inform and guide the public. Lastly, I invite everyone to attend the open house at the tax office tomorrow, Saturday from, today, Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's a great opportunity to ask questions, get guidance, and become more informed because knowledge is key. In closing, Madam Chair, again, with your indulgence, I would like to briefly address the issue of political games, as referenced by the Honourable Member of Parliament, MP York. Madam Chair, you know, I don't know what it is with me and MP York. I can't put my finger on it. But like I told him yesterday, there's something about him that I resonate well with. I really do. And you know, he has a way of, the Honorable MP has a way of the show and tell. And I needed that because I'm a visual person and I need to see. You can't just tell me, this is how something is done. You really have to show me. And so, I too have a bit of show and tell. When I speak about politics being played, Madam Chair, on October 5th, a beautiful day. Anybody knows me, I think MP area knows this for sure, that's my birthday, and anybody who knows me knows that I love birthdays, but that's not relevant to this story. 3 months before the then elections, the then Council of Ministers, comprising of members of the previous NA-UP-led government, formally approved Phase 1 of the tax reform plan. In this Phase 1, referenced by MP Aaron himself, several tax improvement measures were outlined. While it is clear today that none of these measures were implemented, one specific point in the document stands out. But before I get to that point, you had abolishing of taxes, so the land tax, inheritance tax that we discussed. It also had the e-zone legislation and the tax holiday. Actually, that's in Phase 1. Then you had higher BBO rate for hotel rooms and the like, possibly phased from 8% to 10% to 11%. You had introduction of a dual tariff for motor vehicles with a higher rate above a certain weight. You had introduction of gambling tax for winners of the games of chance. And then specifically in this that was approved on October 5th, that special date in 2023, dividend tax or yield tax generating additional income. Section D. Bringing into force the already existing national ordinance on dividend withholding tax 2000 and possibly expand with a revenue tax.
Minister, I need to interrupt you as MP Lacruz has an interruption. MP Lacruz, that is your second interruption, just to let you know. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, if the minister could, because she said she would show, but I'm not seeing anything. So I would like to see exactly what the minister is showing so I could, Thank you.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
as
MP Lacruz, yes, Minister, you have the floor.
As stated, this document, as was requested by MP Arian, will be, if it hasn't already been forwarded, to the honorable members of parliament. As I was, under point D, it explicitly states, and I quote, bringing into force the already existing national ordinance on dividend withholding tax 2000 and possibly expanding with revenue tax. This refers not to a new proposal, but to the enforcement of an existing law, the same law I am now proposing to implement. So let me be clear. The measure was already approved by the previous government. Yet today, when I bring it forward as a realistic and necessary revenue-generating initiative, as well as continuity, we see media headlines, motions, and political cartoons. Madam Chair, I don't know if it was me or if it's something that I heard over the years, but there's something about the 5 W's. The who, the what, the where, the when, the why. And of the 5 W's, the who is of least importance. And I say that because when I took the oath, it didn't matter about political color. It didn't matter about party, as a matter of fact. It mattered about doing what is best for the interest of the people of St. Martin. And that has remained my responsibility. That, honorable members, is what I meant when I said that politics is being played. It is my responsibility as Minister of Finance to put forward solutions that will help our country move forward, solutions that were already agreed to but not acted upon. Let us move away from politics for politics' sake and instead work towards action that benefit all of the people of St. Martin and not just a few. Nevertheless, I genuinely look forward to our future debates on tax reform as they continue to be very engaging and filled with valuable ideas, aspirations, and perspectives. However, as Minister of Finance, my intention is not to spend 4 years simply listening to ideas. I am here to take action. While I may have moved eagerly in presenting a resolution that introduces new revenue to enable future tax relief for the people of St. Martin, I respect the role of Parliament and fully support bringing this matter to the floor for open and democratic debate. As previously mentioned, I propose that we invite a tax specialist to present the factual, technical aspects of this proposal. This should not be a political discussion. It must be a solution-driven dialogue rooted in facts and focused on what is best for our country. We have critical projects on the way: the prison, the mental health facility, the new hospital, and long-awaited improvements to our infrastructure, not forgetting the many homelessness, as mentioned on this same floor of Parliament, or the increase thereof, and persons who are still feeling the effects of Hurricane Irma. The people of St. Martin deserve relief, and achieving that requires bold but responsible decisions. And you know, Madam Chair, there is a leader that I wholeheartedly look up to. And I heard this leader mention many times that at times you just have to make popular and unpopular decisions. And I guess this was one of them. It is time for action, not just discussion. If someone is benefiting from the profits generated in St. Martin, it is only fair that they also contribute to St. Martin. Let us move forward together, grounded in facts and committed to progress. I would like to state that I have taken careful note of the concerns and remarks expressed by members of Parliament regarding the dividend legislation. While I believe the measure may not have been fully understood from the onset by many members of Parliament, I value the feedback received and wish to inform Parliament that I will revisit the proposed implementation process and return to present this to the members of Parliament. As Minister of Finance, I remain committed to working collaboratively with Parliament to reach a solution that is in the best interest of the country. While the discussion has significantly shifted away from the agenda item at hand, namely the 2025 budget, I look forward to addressing any questions or requests for clarifications members of Parliament may have regarding the actual 2025 budget. Madam Chair, this comes to the end of my answers in the first round.
Thank you very much, Minister Gums. I see that we already have members of Parliament with clarification. The first one up is MP Duran. You have the floor.
Good morning. Madam Chair, I have a few clarifications. Through you to the Honorable Minister with regards to Rainforest Adventure, and I'm gonna say this for the record, I do believe that the ministers are playing a sort of, I don't know if to call it tug of war or monkey in the middle, because when I asked the Minister of Rummy initially about the entire process in terms of a tax exemption, the initial response was there was no tax exemption. Oh, my daughter calling me. There was no tax exemption, and there was no exemption request for the long lease relief. However, earlier tonight, the Minister of Rummy mentioned, yes, there was a proposal / request from Rainforest Adventure that has not been approved as yet or something along those lines. And now the minister is coming here of finance and saying there was no request. So through you, Madam Chair, I would like to get clarity. Was there a request for any sort of exemption of taxes or payments to the receiver's office for Rainforest Adventures? Yes or no? And please, I mean, if they could communicate so that the story could be in one line, I would appreciate it. Madam Chair, I must say, through you to the Minister, Minister, you have done, with all due respect, and I don't mean this in any sort of disrespectful manner, but I just have to say it, you have done a great job at confusing the masses. The reason why I say that, Minister, is because you're mentioning now this is nothing new. While everybody was under the impression, based on the, through you, Madam Chair, my apologies, that it was new based on your article. And it states, Minister of Finance Marinka Gomes has announced the introduction of a new 10% dividends withholding tax, a landmark initiative expected to significantly bolster the country's revenue base. The announcement was made during the ongoing 2025 budget debate, goes on to the end and states, unlike a tourist tax which modernized the expanding upon previous regulation, the dividend tax is wholly a new initiative under the Minister of Finance, Minister Gomes. And that's an article written by the minister. So is it new or not? Because you mentioned through you, Madam Chair, there's an 18%, so this additional 10% would then equal 28%. Madam Chair, through you, I requested a documentation of the stakeholder consultation, so I look forward to that being provided. I also heard the minister mention that the advices would be shared as well. I'm glad to hear that this minister is willing to share advices through you, Madam Chair, while we just had the colleague minister of TIAT mention that advices are not allowed to come to Parliament. Again, through you, Madam Chair, please, as the Presidium, Secretary General, call the Prime Minister, and please get this document sharing situation under control. because some ministers have more things to hide than others. And I think that, again, it has to be one line. It cannot be that the Prime Minister is providing advices and documents through the regular confidential route, and certain ministers are choosing not to. I would like the Minister of Finance feedback on document sharing as well. Madam Chair, through you, my motion is very clear, so I would not like for any misconstrued situation in terms of how the minister is trying to explain it. My motion is simply saying to suspend any implementation until Parliament is properly informed of the stakeholder engagements, the steps that are to be taken based on the manner in which it was presented, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, based on what I understood from the minister, majority of the staff doesn't even know about the tax or learn about it during the press briefing. So if that can be clarified as well. Madam Chair, through you, I asked a question during the first round, which was unanswered. When I asked a question, what is the Ministers of Finance stance on the statement made by the Minister of Tiet that there was nothing improper about the manner in which the financial process was handled with Soul Beach? Were all the compliance rules, compatibility for auditing, were all those steps followed? I didn't get a response to that. And Madam Chair, when I saw the minister bring up the paper, I really expected that an exclusive was about to drop. But this was mentioned by the former Minister of Finance, my colleague MP, yesterday, in terms of exploring all options in terms of revenue generating. So for me, Madam Chair, it is pretty clear what this is, and I heard the minister mention the word politic a lot of times, but I think the politicking is coming from Swaliga Boulevard. And I really just would like some clarity on the questions posed, because at the end of the day, Madam Chair, I have an obligation to my constituents, and I will not be silenced by no minister. I will ask every single question I need to ask, and if I have to ask it 10 times to get clarity on it, based on the manner in which it's responded to, I will do that. Because at the end of the day, I'm not here on anyone that is in this room's invitation. I'm here to represent the people, and I was given that mandate. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the clarification responses. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duran. The next member of parliament is MP York. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll be brief. In one of my first questions, I elucidated on back to a earlier debate where I explained that the minister not having the tax to GDP ratio readily available then, and not having a tax to GDP ratio where the target where she would like to get to, through you, Madam Chair, is not knowing where we are, and not, in order to know where we're going, we got to know where we are. And I asked those same questions again. And when I look at the answers, so basically what is our current tax to GDP ratio? What is a target tax to GDP ratio? I don't see that anywhere in the answer given. Maybe I'm not seeing it. The minister answered something else. Maybe the question wasn't fully understood. But basically that was what my first question was. Moving forward, so if the minister can clarify those two questions for me, please. I also asked for the implementation strategy of what the minister has planned for her tax reform, especially as it pertains to dividend taxing moving forward. And the minister stated in her answer that this is still being worked on by the reform work group. Madam Chair, through you, can the minister clarify that if it's still, the plan is still being worked on, why is there a tax now, whether it's old, whether it was on a sideline, whatever category the minister would want to call it, why is this being rolled out, being worked on now, while the rest is still part of the work group? So why isn't Why are we not waiting until the work group is complete before rolling out anything to have a total comprehensive outlook on where we're going? So can the minister clarify why she's taking the route she's taking instead of just waiting for everything to be completed before execution? And I also asked the minister, how does the implementation of the dividends tax increase compliance? The minister did, through you, Madam Chair, answer the question, but I didn't fully understand the explanation. So if the minister can explain it in a bit more layman's terms, I'm not legal, I'm not a tax specialist, but if the minister can explain it in more layman's terms, that I will be able to follow it a bit more, because I didn't understand. It was explained, but I didn't understand the explanation. And Madam Chair, I would also like the minister to clarify if on that list that she alluded to as it pertains to what the former Minister Aaron was working on as it pertains to the different phases, if there was a exemption for corporate tax for housing associations also on that list. So can the minister clarify if such a tax is found somewhere on the list that she was alluding to? And that would bring further clarity to the different phases for my person. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP York. The next MP for clarification is MP Irian. You have the floor.
Good morning, President. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Honorable Minister of Finance and Support Staff, all the staff still working, and the viewing public. Madam Chair, the Minister, through you, kept mentioning throughout her answering that this is not a new tax, this is not a new tax, but the Minister is making it seem as if the members of Parliament is the one, or are the ones that mentioned this is a new tax. As was stated before, the Minister of Finance in her own press release on the government's website is the one that mentioned that Minister of Finance, Miracle Gums, has confirmed during the budget debate that the new 10% dividend withholding tax is on the way. Not the members of Parliament, the minister and her PR is the one that said that. So I think it's very unfair to say that we are making it seem as if it's a new tax, whereas that's the statement of the minister herself. Matter of fact, in the other press release, it stated a landmark new initiative. That was not us that said that. That was the minister that said that. Madam Chair, and it's very confusing, and I can understand why the business community is very confused, because the minister keeps referencing Bonaire, for example. And to clarify, the minister said that the government is expecting to make $10 million, and the local businesses will not be affected because they get a credit. So that would mean that the 10 million guilders is generated only off of the foreign entities. And I questioned, I said, in Bonaire, the local residents also pay, and there's no mechanism for refund. So I would like clarity on that, Madam Chair. The 10 million guilders, is that only from foreign entities? Because we can't be saying we're getting 10 million guilders on one end, but then you're getting a credit on the other end. Then the money is off. So what is this 10 million guilders based off of? Only foreign entities or local entities? Or are we going to hold the local entities' money for a while and give them back in the future? The minister also mentioned that, matter of fact, the minister kept mentioning that the dividends currently is already paid locally. So maybe to clarify for everyone, because I think other MPs also asked me this, so how much dividends is collected right now by the government? So if we're saying that they're collecting right now already, how much is that? So then we can extrapolate the data and know. The minister mentioned that dividend is typically paid out once a year. But what is that based on? How does the minister know that dividends is paid out once a year? Because you can have a quarterly dividend or not. Through you, Madam Chair, the minister keeps mentioning that it's not a new tax, but I want clarity. If businesses were not legally required to withhold or remit 10% on dividends payouts before, then it's a new legal requirement, a new compliance, a new obligation. So how is it not a new tax? I also asked the minister, has the tax administration confirmed whether the current IT systems can even process or track the dividends withholding? Can the current IT system do this? The minister mentioned that TWO would do procurement system, but that's not what I asked. I asked, can the current IT systems do that? Because we're going to implement it in January. We need to know now if it's possible. I also asked, what is budgeted for the campaign? Because the minister mentioned that, and even other MPs mentioned, and even press releases, that we're talking about things that have nothing to do with the budget, but it does have to do with the budget. It has to do with our expenses. So how much is budgeted for the campaign, and when will advice start? I also asked a question regarding Soul Beach and the $175,000. I asked to both ministers, and I know it's already late, so I just have to put the other questions in the second round that was missed. But the Minister of TIAT mentioned that Soul Beach is an additional revenue. And the minister's answers also, she said that the payment was made in 2024. And that's true, I'm assuming. But the Minister of TIAT also mentioned that payments were also made in 2025. But the Minister of Finance specific to it mentioned that the payment was made in 2024. The concessions were already paid. The Minister of TIAT mentioned this is an additional payment based on revenues owed. That is not reflected in budget 2024. The government, and I also stated it, the government cannot, you can have money in the bank account, but if it's not budgeted, the government cannot legally, as per the Constitution, as per the NFTA, as per the National Accountability Ordinance, take money off the account and make any payments unless it's budgeted. So again, where in 2024, and according to the answers given before, you cannot say, I'll fix it in the annual accounts because it was never budgeted. So again, where in 2024 or 2025 were the additional payments or the income from the port reflected in the budget so that the government was able to execute? And I'll leave it there, Madam Chair, and I'll just go further in the second round.
Thank you, MP Irian. And I see that there are no other MPs with clarifications. Minister, I look to you to see if you require a few minutes or if we should just adjourn for, are you ready to go one time, or would you like us to adjourn for 2 minutes? You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on the clarification questions, I think I will need additional time. If allotted, can I please come back on Monday morning to provide the answers for clarifications?
That is an excellent suggestion, considering originally we were going to come tomorrow to finish this off and start the second round. But I see no issue with that, Minister. And hopefully the questions that were asked multiple ways were clear to you as well, because they were asked in interruptions as well as in the clarification. And with that, it is now 3:29. I would like to thank all the MPs as well as the ministers and their teams and the staff here in Parliament and those still listening in for their attention, indulgence at this very late